Hi again, I'm Tom from TuneProducer.com. Today I get to sit down and talk about music and touring with my good friend Dan Policar, an amazing keyboard player. Dan is going to share with our audience what goes into being a full-time touring musician. Dan, where does your story begin?
So I started playing when I was about 6 years old. I come from a legacy of musicians. My mother is an elementary music teacher, still currently to this day.
Still working?
Still working, about to retire. She plays, guitar, piano, flute, sings. She used to direct choirs. She was always involved with a ton of stuff musically. Her father is actually still living and playing trumpet, arranging. Trumpet is his main instrument, but he played, a million instruments,
Sure.
Guitar, trombone, and arranged for a band for years. And her brother, my uncle, is an exceptional saxophone player. And so I come from a lineage of it. It was in the blood, as they say.
Beautiful. And you end up playing keyboards.
That's right.
Piano, organ. And
That's
you
right.
started at a pretty early age, so that gives you a lot of background. What's the most exciting part about playing keyboards for you?
Well, the most exciting part for me is the moments of performance, right? To be on stage in front of thousands of people. There's energy that you just can't really get.
This is true.
A lot of other ways.
I wouldn't know that, but I would imagine it's not.
No, you come with me one day. And then
there you go. Sean, don't mind. He's going to come up and play the next set. So as a keyboard player, you have lots of opportunities.
Sure.
And you're touring around now with a great act, who is?
A guy named Sean Paul, Jamaican dancehall artist, who I'm lucky and fortunate to play with.
Sure.
Yes, I did a lot of work to get there, but it's still,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of things that have to go right to get into a situation like that, and I'm in probably one of the best situations I know of. Mainly because of the music is great. We get to play all over the world, but also the people involved from Sean right on down the line, and the band that plays with Sean, known as the Bada Bands. I'm 1/4 of that band and happy to be 1/4 of that band.
Beautiful. How'd you get that gig?
So that's an interesting kind of story that a lot of people are like, oh, you must have just walked in and got it, or somebody called you right. It's a little more convoluted than that. So a friend of mine named Lewis, exceptional keyboard player, calls me up, or I think he sent me a text, and he says, hey, so we have auditions, Sean Paul auditions tomorrow in New York City. I said, well, that's great. Thanks for calling me. The only issue is I'm in Arizona, and auditions are in New York City. So I said, do a great job, kill it, get the gig. At the time, I was working with a rapper named Fabulous, and I had been working with him for years. So I wasn't necessarily looking to jump away into a new situation, especially one that was unknown. But anyway, long story, slightly shorter. He auditions for the gig the next day, and he hits me up a few days later and said, hey, I got the gig. I said, great job, man. You deserve it. I'm not surprised. They picked the right guy for the job. And fast forward another few days, he calls me back and says, hey, so listen, I can't do the gig. The dates of the tour changed. And they didn't actually change. There was additional tours. He thought it was just auditioning for one tour,
Mm-hmm.
a couple weeks,
Sure.
and then done. No, Sean was looking to replace his whole band, which, of course, I didn't know anything about it at all, really, other than Sean's music. So he calls up the management and he says, hey, I got a guy that I know. He's going to be an even better choice. And why couldn't he do it? Well, he was signed to a Latin band at the time, and he had a tour that was conflicting, and he was already signed on to do that tour. So he said, you got to bail me out. So he calls up the management. Before he calls me, I already called up the management and told them I got this guy. He's a better choice than me. So I was like, okay, well, let me do my research. I did, and of course, I got an email or a call or whatever from the management a short time later. So we want to send up the musical director back to New York because he lives in Jamaica, and have you audition for him. I said, okay, sure.
So, one-on-one?
Yeah, one-on-one. He came to my house. So he comes to my house. I've never met him before. And it turns out I said, all right, cool, I'm going to prepare. I'm going to program some keyboards. I'm going to do some cool stuff that I don't think everybody's going to do. So I played a song that Sean has called Give It Up to Me, right? And that has, I really like the chords in it. I really thought there was nice keyboard parts in the song. So the musical director shows up at my house. I say, yeah, I'm going to play you Give It Up to Me. He says, okay, cool. He doesn't really calm about it. Play this, and then I play it at the end. About 5 minutes into playing, he goes, so you got the gig, you know. I said, okay, great. He's like, but let me ask you about this, this, and this. He says, did you hear this part in it? I said, oh, yeah, now I hear it. I didn't hear it at the time. Turns out he produced and played and wrote the record. So that was his song.
Yeah,
he knew it as well as anybody's going to know it.
That's a great little bit of additional pressure, I think.
Had I done my better research, maybe I would have known that beforehand and done that same thing anyway. But it was a happy accident, I guess.
That's nice.
So you know, that's Nigel Staff, the guy's name. Good friend of mine and mentor of mine, and happy to be, you know, in a group with him for so many years and touring
Beautiful.
with him for so many years.
How long have you been doing this gig for?
I think since 2012. 7 years, I think, is when we started.
That's great.
It's been a while.
That's great.
Yeah.
Do you do any recording with them?
Sure. So we do recording, and I think the interesting part about the recording that we do with Sean is that it could be anywhere in the world. Like, I've literally recorded with him in Jamaica in his studio, which is obviously, you know, we spend a lot of time in Jamaica. I'm usually there a couple times a year for rehearsals, shows, just whatever.
Hopefully it's during the winter time in the Northeast.
Yeah. Well, I was just there a few weeks ago. We recorded at Tough Gong Studios, which was great, and that was for the BBC. So BBC One Extra recorded a full concert of us, and they just put it out a few weeks ago. But that was great. So anyway, back to the recording. We literally record everywhere. I've recorded with them in Europe, in hotel rooms, in studios. On
Long Island.
On Long Island. So in my own studio, I'll record sometimes and send it to him. Every once in a while, he'll text me or call me and say, Dan, yo, I need this. Can you send me something for this? I said, okay, sure.
Not a problem.
You know, send it over to him, and so you know, that's 2019. We can record anywhere, anything, you know.
Except for acoustic guitars.
Yeah, not so much.
So have you toured to any unusual places?
Well, I mean,
I'm sure you've toured to a million unusual places. But what was the most surprising?
Well, here's the cool part. I've been to more than 50 countries with him in the past 7 years, which is a lot.
Sure is.
There's not that many more. Well, there's plenty more countries to go still, but there's not, you know, it's a lot of places.
It is.
A number of states. But some of the more interesting places and maybe unique places that I've gone that haven't necessarily been open to Western music until recently is somewhere like Saudi Arabia. I was in Saudi Arabia recently, and that's not really a place that's been freely open to Western acts, and this is kind of a new thing that they're trying to do. We were there, Mariah Carey was there, and Tiesto was there at the same time, and we did a show over there, and it was excellent. I mean, the people loved it. It was well received, and it was a really unique experience. You know, I mean, we have a lot of countries that I would never have expected to go. You know, I would have never expected to go to different places in Africa besides maybe the usual, maybe South Africa or Morocco or somewhere like that. But we've gone Mozambique, Uganda, we've been to Sri Lanka, India, all over Europe pretty much,
it's amazing.
Eastern Europe, Australia, New Zealand. You know.
Who gets to keep the miles?
Good question. We do, actually. I've accumulated a fair amount of miles, as you can probably imagine.
I would imagine that you'll be able to get some good vacations.
Yeah, well, not really always vacations, because when I vacation now, I'd prefer not to fly if I
can understand why.
drive somewhere maybe close. That would be nice.
I feel the same exact
Yeah.
way. After all the years being on the road with my business,
The more you do it, the less you're...
it's not appealing.
Well, it's business is what it ends up becoming.
Staying in hotel rooms is not my pleasure, even if it's a Four Seasons.
I don't mind the hotels as long as it's for like maybe 2 or 3 nights at a time. When it becomes tough when it's one night here, one night there, one night here, one night there.
Yeah.
And what happens to me is I'm the type of person that forgets stuff in the hotel room. I've lost so many pieces of clothing and just personal stuff all the time. It's just hard to stay focused when you're, the main point of you being on tour, right, is to perform for that 60 minutes, 75 minutes, 90 minutes. And the rest of it is travel usually.
Sure.
Or logistics. So that taxes your body because the travel is not always friendly. It's not like, oh, we're going to fly in a couple of days before, we're going to leisurely take our time. No, we don't have time to do that. We have a show today in Italy. We have a show tomorrow in the UK. We got to do the show, which is a late night. It's not
Sure.
the middle of the day. Do our sound check. Fly early the next morning. Go to the sound check. Try to, if you can, take a shower, get dressed, get ready for the show, perform the show, and then, lather, rinse, repeat, and do the same thing again.
Lather, rinse, and repeat. This is an interesting question, only in that I don't think that you can answer it in a very positive way. But what's your favorite part of being on the road other than leaving?
No, my favorite part that's actually an easy question for me.
Okay.
My favorite part of being on the road is those 60, 75, or 90 minutes that we're on stage. That's literally what we're there to do.
The performance.
Yeah, the performance. And that's what I spent all those years, practicing. Honestly, though, if you would have told me when I was younger, oh yeah, you'll be on world tours, you'll be performing in front of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, I'd have told you, yeah, that's funny.
Well, it's actually really every young musician's dream that they're going to hit it big when they first start playing. And in your case, you never thought like that?
No, I mean, I still don't. I still think of myself as like, I have a long way to go.
Well, I would hope so.
Yeah,
you're a young guy.
Yeah, but even then, I mean, like if you would have told me 15 years ago, even or 10 years ago, when I first started working with Fabulous, for example, he was probably the first well-known act that I really got a job working for, and I would have told you that wasn't going to happen, But I just spent a lot of time working on it, and then, trying to take it step by step and saying, all right, now I need to do this. All right, now I need to do this. Now I need to do this. And so even where I've gotten now, there's so much further that I feel like I've barely started.
What other kinds of gigs do you play?
Sure. Well, I mean, I play basically anything. I've played Jewish music in the past with a band for many years I worked with. I played hip hop. I've toured with jazz big band. I've played classical music, although not so much recently because it's very difficult and that music takes a whole different kind of effort and focus that I just don't, unfortunately, have the availability to do.
What do you do when you're home, off the road?
Sure. Well, now I work with an agency called Element Music, and they've been really great to me. They're really supportive of having artists that come work for them as opposed to just musicians. So they're supportive of folks who want to go out and tour and, achieve, great, I would say try to achieve great success as a musician in addition to working for them locally. And they also travel a lot too, so they're actually really...
It's not just a club date office.
That would be an oversimplification, I think, a gross oversimplification. They do events all over the world, and but their main focus is events, events and private events typically.
I got you.
Corporate,
Parties,
whatever, sure.
So, for one of my last dives into your brain and your experience, how do you manage to get all the practice in that you need when you're a busy guy like yourself?
Okay, so you want the real answer or the fake answer? I'll give you both. So the real answer is, yeah, you just practice. You make it work. You make it happen. Or that's kind of the quick, typical answer. The real answer is you do whatever it takes to make it happen. And sometimes that means you're just not going to have the adequate time to be able to do something. So you have to kind of figure out almost shortcuts in a way. I actually work at a church when I'm here home. I work in a church every Sunday, and I perform a lot of different songs. At the time, I didn't know any of these songs, so I had to learn them and learn them quickly. That, to be honest, really helped me start to say, oh, you got to learn this stuff super fast. You got to just try to figure out ways to trick your brain into remembering all these little parts as fast as you possibly can. Because, for example, when I started working with Fabulous, my good friend and your good friend Derek Wright, exceptional drummer.
I've got to get Derek.
Derek should be here, please.
That's right.
He'd be great. I'd love to watch it. Exceptional drummer. He calls me up one morning and says, hey, you got to be at rehearsal in an hour. Can you be in the city in an hour? I said, okay. That night was the show. 30 songs had to be learned for that show. So what do you think happened? Can you realistically learn 30 songs in a couple hours rehearsal?
Absolutely not. But you've got amazing ears.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
As long as you have a decent bass player and a singer who's somewhere in the key.
Well, thankfully he's a rapper, so he doesn't have to be on key.
There you go. So
the bass player was exceptional.
Then you really don't need to learn the changes.
No, the bass player was exceptional and still is. A guy named Shelton Gray. But yeah, that was really an impossibility. So when they say, oh, how do you practice? How do you find time to practice? Well, you can't. You just have to go and do what you can do. So you have to rely on all the years of study that you've put in. And like I said, figuring out these like mind tricks to get it done. And the reality was, for that particular show, there was only a couple of certain important moments that I had to make sure I nailed, and we focused on those at the rehearsal. I just said, all right, give this to me again, as much as we could, and made it happen.
So here's something that hasn't snuck into our conversation yet, but I understand that you teach as well.
Sure, yeah. I don't have the time to teach a full load of students or anything like that at the moment, but I've started teaching at a school once a week. I have a class. It looks like it's going to expand a little bit. Again, it's hard because I'm trying to balance that schedule with being able to teach all the guys that want to learn. But yeah, that class is more focused on songwriting, production, and as it relates to keyboard. So how do we take this keyboard and put it in a focus there? And then I do have a private student or two that are piano, that are focused on exclusively, hey, we saw you play all this stuff, show me how to do this.
Sure.
And there's that as well.
What we should do is we should tell our viewers that you're going to provide us with an email address.
Sure.
So that we can find you and...
Yeah, well, you can find me on probably the easiest place to find me and communicate is Instagram, which is at Dan the Band NYC. That's probably the easiest way to find me.
Dan the Band NYC.
Yes, sir.
We'll make sure that we put that in as well.
Yep.
So as we draw to a close here, what would you like your future to look like?
That's a good question too. So I think the most important thing for me to focus on and push really hard for in the future is to expand the writing, the songwriting, the composition, and the music production that I do, because I do a lot of that as well. I've worked for Sean doing some production and writing. Last year I did a record for Raekwon, the guy from the Wu-Tang Clan, one of the greatest rappers, lyricists of all time. And there's so many other artists there that both name artists and up-and-coming acts. And I kind of want to work with all of those, because I love the fact that an established act, you can learn so much. And then I love the fact that a new act, you can teach so much. And then everything in between. So that's one thing I would like to do, is to expand a lot of the production, the writing, and I'm actually recently starting to work on some compositions for things like podcasts. There's a podcast called the 15-Minute Financial Advisor that I'm working on doing a theme song for right now. And shout out to my brother whose podcast that is. He's a financial advisor, and that's his, very different from what I do, but that's his job, and he's having a lot of success with that podcast, and he's asked me to, hey,
Score it.
help me out. Let's take it to the next level.
Beautiful.
So I'm happy to do that.
Sure, man.
Those are
It's
kind of the
music.
things. It's music. You can't go wrong, really.
That's right.
You can't go wrong.
And as long as they remember the music, screw the words.
Right. Well, in the case of these things, they probably won't have words.
Well, there you go.
These themes, and I can't wait to hear which song is selected to open and close this interview.
You mean you haven't written it yet?
No, I'm depending on you to have written this one.
Thank you, my friend, for doing this.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
And that's a cut. This is Tom for TuneProducer.com, your connection for inside information about the music entertainment business and the musicians that keep it going.